So today I wanted to touch on the question of, are we living in an age of abundance or scarcity? In current times, people may feel helpless or hopeless or even feel susceptible to a victim's mentality in times of perceived scarcity or lack of resources, lack of job opportunities. Uh, and now, although these sentiments may appear valid to the individual, you're always left with the choice to examine the glass as either being half full or half empty. And with that, I wanted to talk about some of the brilliant minds of our time who address some of these ideas of abundance versus scarcity. First, I want to touch on the American economist Thomas Sowell. He mentions when discussing the fundamental role of knowledge in economic progress through time that makes the point that early man, even in the Stone Age, had access to essentially the same physical resources as people do today. However, the critical difference in their standard of living versus ours lies in the knowledge that humanity has accumulated over millennia to discover, understand, and utilize those resources, right? And so there's 3 points. One is physical resources were always present. Number two, the missing ingredient was knowledge. And three, knowledge unlocks abundance. So for the first point, where physical resources were always present, the earth contained basically the same elements and raw materials at the beginning of human history as it does now. Iron ore, oil, fertile land, etc. In this physical sense, there was a potential of abundant resources. His second point, the missing ingredient was knowledge, right? So what early man lacked was knowledge of how to find these resources effectively, how to extract them from the earth, how to refine them and transform them into useful tools, energy, and goods that could improve their lives. They were surrounded by potential resources, but they didn't know how to turn them into actual prosperity and wealth, right? And the last point from Mr. Sowell is that knowledge unlocks abundance. So as he points to the progress from the Stone Age to the modern era, it's a testament to the power of knowledge creation and dissemination. It is the development of understanding in areas like agriculture, metallurgy, physics, chemistry, and countless other fields that has allowed humanity to unlock the potential within those raw materials and create the abundance that we experience today, right? So, in summary of that, he's emphasizing that the mere physical presence of resources is not enough for prosperity. It is the human capacity to acquire and apply knowledge that transforms potential resources into actual abundance and drives economic advancement. The discovery he refers to is not just finding the physical location of resources, but discovering how to use them effectively through the growth of knowledge and technology. The second individual I wanted to touch on is the British physicist David Deutsch. He's someone who's always pontificating on the multiverse and, has all these ideas and theories that are very insightful. But when he talks about the abundance of resources through knowledge, Deutsch argues against, there's a spaceship Earth idea. And this is the notion that the Earth is a fragile, limited haven in a vast, empty, and hostile cosmos, and that our primary concern should be conserving the finite resources within this limited sphere, right? But instead, Mr. Deutsch posits that the true limiting factor is not that the scarcity of matter of energy, but the knowledge of how to harness and transform them. He suggests that the raw materials and energy in the universe are, for all practical purposes, abundant if we have the knowledge, the know-how to utilize them. Right? His second point is that humans, as agents of abundance, Mr. Deutsch sees humans with our capacity for conscious thought, creativity, and the creation of explanatory knowledge as profoundly untypical and significant entities in the cosmos. Our ability to understand and manipulate the laws of nature allows us to tap into and unlock the universe's inherent abundance, transforming what might appear to be barren or hostile environments into places where life and civilization can flourish, right? And there's a lot of truth when I think about, I guess, like that point, for instance, when I think of like a barren existence or desert, you can take that piece of land in the middle of nowhere in northern Nevada and transform it into this festival called Burning Man, where people go and have all kinds of experiences there, all kind of creative experiences, and transform what was once barren to something very immersive, right? You can take a desert like in the Indio Valley, Coachella, right, and transform it into this sonically immersive musical experience with all the bands that come out, right? And so it just alludes to this idea that we lack certain knowledge and know-how, which is what keeps us from being able to see the transformative value of some type of resource, of some type of element that currently exists today, right? And so, with that, touching on this next idea from American billionaire Ray Dalio, he has this idea that 1 + 1 = 3, right? Not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 = 3. And he's essentially referring to the power of effective collaboration and synergy. And this is, alluding to like in the work environment. But it's a central idea that when people are working well together, they can yield results that are significantly greater than the sum of what individuals could achieve independently, right? So essentially what you're able to see is compounding effects, right? Two different individuals coming together with different perspectives and experiences can complement each other's ideas, right, as they merge, right? You're able to catch each other's blind spots and bring light to something that may have been missed, right, by working together. You're able to leverage each other's strengths, right? Where you're weak, that person's strong, right? That's just like when someone starts a business or a startup, right? Hey, you know how to do marketing, you know how to sell, but you don't have the technical know-how. This other person, maybe they don't know how to sell. Maybe they're super introverted, but they're super, stellar engineer, right? You combine those two together, that's where you see the 1 + 1 = 3, right? And then also when you join one plus another, the accountability level is higher. You tend to have higher standards. That's why, I guess they say statistically, when two individuals get married, or I guess a married couple versus, I guess, non-married or single, wealth creation is more abundant, at least in the Western American culture. That's what the current statistics say, right? And, you know, besides like certain tax incentives and whatnot, I think the notion that there's a higher level of accountability to your partner, which kind of raises your standards, I think that plays a part, in that notion of 1 + 1 = 3, right? You're able to create new types of abundance because of the level of ownership and agency required to operate within that dynamic, right? And so the underlying, summary is that high functioning partnership or a team can achieve a level of effectiveness and innovation that is non-linearly greater than the simple addition of individual contributions, right? And so I mentioned all of these kind of points about, are we in an age of abundance versus scarcity? Because as technology continues to develop and grow, right, with the AI revolution that's happening right before our eyes, there's a lot of fear out there. There's also a lot of optimism, right? There's kind of a mixed sentiment, right? The fear comes from the idea that, hey, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to have to learn something so technically far-fetched that I won't be able to grasp, right? Like, I don't want to become an engineer, so how in the world am I going to survive in the next version of existence in this world? Sometimes people forget, just throughout time, how technology has continually been injected into society and transformed the whole dynamic of how we operate, right? We're like on the 100-year anniversary of the Roaring '20s. And when you look at the Roaring '20s, this refers to the decade of the 1920s in Western society and Western culture in America, where economic prosperity was abundant. Inventions that shaped America in the 1920s included the automobile, right? I mean, we still drive cars. The airplane, we still use planes to take trips, right? The washing machine, that is an essential piece of equipment to have in the home. The radio, some of us still use our radio in our vehicles. The assembly line. I mean, think about just the concept of an assembly line. That is one of those things we take for granted, how powerful. It's been reapplied to various applications, right? It's not just moving cars or products through an assembly line, which, created efficiencies, cost savings for companies. But even when you think of why a company like, when you apply it to the food industry, a company like Chipotle, what made them innovative is they were able to be effective in establishing systems. And what they did was they created and implemented that kind of assembly line approach to putting your food together, right? And making it very simple menu, limited options. Hey, I want a wrap, or I want a bowl. I want beef, chicken, or tofu, or chorizo. I want vegetables. I want beans. I want rice. Done, right? It's like it moves people through quickly without having to overthink with limited, menu options, right? That's an assembly line innovation. The refrigerator. We're still using the refrigerator today. I mean, that modern technology allows us to preserve food longer, keeps bugs and animals away from it and protected so that it doesn't go bad faster, right? We take these things for granted. With that in the kitchen, the garbage disposal was created in the 1920s, right? And the electric razor, we still use razors today, even manual, right? But the electric razor is used, right? Think of getting your hair cut. I mean, oh my gosh, before the electronics, like, how did people cut their hair? Especially people of different ethnic varieties where your hair is coarse or just different. Like you couldn't just take shears and scissors and just shape it, right? Like you had to, it would be very challenging. But with electric razors, which led to, clippers, I mean, that just transformed our whole idea of beauty standards, right? Or how to make oneself appear. The instant camera. I mean, that camera has gone through so many evolutions in the past 100 years, and look what it's doing now. I mean, I'm on an iteration of what was the instant camera at one point in history. Now we're all taking selfies, videos, pics, and it's created so much value. Memory creation, right? Curation of just family, friend photos, just all kinds of memories, right? Your trips, of the food you eat. It's led to this. It's literally led to videos, the ability to watch TV, things like that. I mean, speaking of the TV, I mean, if that's not the most, I mean, that is one of the most innovative. I mean, look at Netflix. Look at all the shows that we, you know, tune into, social media. I mean, as I mentioned, the phone. The reason why we're tuned into this is because these are iterations bouncing off of those original ideas. Jukebox. Jukebox was another one, right? Music is still fundamental to many of us in our lives. We listen to music on our phones and everything, but originally those sounds had to come through a variety of different instrumentation, right? And that's through, different iterations over time. But now the current forms are like in our phones, in our TVs, and so yeah, that's the 1920s, right? So just imagine with the introduction of the artificial intelligence applications, what it will do potentially in society, right? I know there was a time when, going back over 100 years ago, people were fearing what's going to happen to our horses with these cars, right? Now you're thinking about how that disrupts that whole supply chain, right? Like how is it going to impact the farmers, the whole, transportation, how people get to and from places, different businesses that rely on that, right? It impacts all kinds of, the entire industry, right? But unbeknownst to those individuals or those naysayers at the time, they didn't realize that a whole new door would open, a whole new window of opportunity to a whole nother industry that we didn't even foresee, right? And now we're just, we're not even talking just regular automobiles now, right? Like we have electric vehicles, right? And now these electric vehicles have evolved to, now we have autonomous vehicles that we, the Waymo and other companies that are, on the up and coming. And one day we will see fully autonomous vehicles riding around in the city, successfully transporting human beings from point A to point B, right? We're on the verge of that. So that's exciting. But I know that there's a dystopian sentiment, right? Felt amongst some other individuals. When you look at, episodes of Black Mirror, one of my favorite shows on Netflix, right, has kind of this dystopian view of the world when technology is, embedded throughout society. I just saw this recent season, I think it's season 7, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7. But it's interesting, kind of the ways they showcase what AI might look like, in the future, and the types of technologies that they showcase are ones that are very believable and ones that don't seem too far out, right? They seem like things that actually can happen in the next like 10 to 30 years, right? There was one episode where, you know, the lady, I guess they were in an accident and she had some type of brain trauma. And so there was a company called Rivermind who could, after she recovered, and her husband agreed to the surgery, they implanted something in her, some device or something in her brain, into where it can be controlled via an app on your phone, right? And essentially, what the app does is allows you to regulate your emotions and your mood, right? And there are like limitations, like to how often you can use the app without being bombarded with advertisements, right? You can always upgrade, right? And if you pay a premium, you can bypass those subscriptions. And I found that interesting. And it's, almost very similar today, right? If I want to avoid seeing ads in my YouTube watching, I just subscribe to YouTube Premium and I don't have to sit there and watch them, right? But now we're just thinking of this external world. Now this is like internal, like this biological internal world where like the app is integrated with you as a human. And I think of technologies that are like right there. You think of Elon Musk's Neuralink. Like I can see this manifesting in the real world where, hey, there's an app when it comes to just the neurological pathways in my brain and just my mood and emotions. I can control it, right? Like if I want to feel more sensation, then I dial it up, right? Now I engage with whether it's, say, it's lovemaking or I'm at a sports entertainment experience, right? I'm at my favorite artist concert, right? Or at a UFC fight or, a football game or basketball game. If I dial up the emotion higher, my mood will be more amplified, right? And, and more sensationalized, right? And so I just thought that was interesting. And for some people that actually might be useful. When I think of a use case for medical treatment, it could be a way to cure depression or some type of relationship issues or something we haven't even thought of, right? So I think, ideas like that that you see coming from shows like that, it definitely gets you thinking about and reflecting on like what is possible, right? And with anything that's new, it's not uncommon that there's some type of fear, but that's only kind of natural part of the human experience, right? And we it's that flight or fight kind of reaction. And because we don't know, we're entering into the unknown, and anything that might compromise our well-being, potentially, are things that we're going to generate some type of anxiety around or some type of fear, right? But what history has shown is that human beings are pretty resilient, right? Very creative, and can endure, right? And can iterate. And we've seen that time and time and time again. The amount of innovation is, just in the past 30 years is pretty incredible. I mean, just thinking back to the worldwide adoption of the use of the internet back, like, let's just say the late 90s, right? You have like google.com as a search engine, as one of the main go-to search engines, even though there was other ones prior to that, like Alta Vista and all these other ones that kind of fell to the wayside. It was like in the late 90s when in terms of mass adoption, at least in America, where people started really using computers, using the internet, and look how far we've come. Like it's pretty mind blowing just to see like what is possible, right? And so, with that said, I would just say be optimistic. Be optimistic when it comes to the idea that the world is truly abundant. We've gone through this over and over. You know, as it says in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun, right? And so I think that's true. Like humans have gone through these types of feelings and emotions and sentiments in the past, you know, whether it was 100 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, right? Whenever some type of new invention comes on the scene, there's going to be some type of fear as to how that may impact, you know, my livelihood, right? And so just be open-minded, embrace the potential of where technology can take us when you think of like AI. Understand that the world has always been kind of the same, right? Throughout time. Right? There was a French chemist from the 18th century, Antoine Lavoisier, that coined the phrase, you know, matter is neither created nor destroyed, but it can be transformed from one state to another, such as from a solid to a liquid or to a gas, right? However, in the realm of nuclear physics and advanced experiments, especially with today's technology, matter can definitely be created and destroyed through processes. There's a particular process called particle antiparticle annihilation, right? But the point is that everything, for the most part, that existed hundreds, thousands of years ago, that was available in terms of chemistry, in terms of elements, are still here today, right? It's just the only thing that's really changed is human population. Building structures, how animals are oriented in this world, right? Like at one point they were roaming around the world. There's probably an abundance of different types of animals. Now there's kind of a lopsided dynamic, right? We probably have way more domesticated dogs, right? I think there's more dogs than humans. I'm not sure. Or there's some kind of stat out there where there's just an abundance of dogs in existence compared to, its origin, going back to just wolf's ancestry, right? Cows, there's like an abundance of cows, right? So a lot of the farming animals, there's more of those versus other types of creatures in this world, just because of our kind of capitalistic, ambitions that exist today, right? And what we have to remember is that if everything is essentially the same in terms of geography, for the most part, relatively speaking, right? We're not talking millions of years ago, but I'm just talking over the past 10, 20, 50,000 years ago. Earth has been pretty much the earth, right? And it's always had this mystique to it, right? This mystery where there's a lock, or at least in this intangible lock, invisible lock, that we as humans just have to figure out, discern what is that mystery so that we can unlock that mystery and discover new things, novelty, right? And so that's why I say when we come together, 1+1 is 3, right? We're able to have these compounding effects where new ideas emerge, as we collaborate with other human beings. And not just human beings, but other sentient beings, right? There's so many things we learn even from animals, right? And we implement it into our technologies. I mean, think about like the stealth bomber plane. If you see the shape of it, it looks pretty much like a bird, or I think like a falcon or a hawk. If you look at some of those military planes, a lot of those were adapted or at least inspired by kind of the aerodynamic shape of some of these birds, and they leverage some of those, those insights that they got from studying these animals. That, oh, okay, if that's how the certain falcons or hawks or eagles are able to gain certain types of velocity and speed in the air, perhaps we're able to introduce that into this design, these hardware, for these planes, right? And so inspiration can come from anywhere, right? It comes through kind of this visceral experience, right? That moment of that innate moment, that gut feeling, right? Like when you're like inspired to move or react or to partake in some type of action, that is when kind of new ideas emerge. And those are the moments where it's in your best interest to lean into that a little more and figure out, okay, why am I thinking this thing about this or feeling a certain way, right? And that can lead you towards kind of the next step, right? It can guide you towards, all right, I've unlocked this door. Where do I navigate from right there, right? And I guess going back to the idea of abundance versus scarcity, right? One of the key things you'll hear a lot of, I guess, wealthy people say, or financially successful people say, especially when it comes to the business world, is you might have limited resources, but the challenge is with the resources you do have, albeit that they're limited, how can you be resourceful with your limited resources, right? So you might not have as many resources as someone, but how can you basically get very creative with the limited resources that you have? And I think if you start there, start with where you are, start with what you have, start within that orbit, right? You might not know too much about a certain industry and you want to get into it, or you may not have many contacts. All right, well, you might not know 100 people. Who's one person that you know, right? Start within your orbit. From there, have a conversation with that person. Now that person might be able to open a door to 2 or 3 other people, right? And then from those 3 people that you have access to, perhaps they may open up and have certain insights that you didn't even anticipate, right? And it's sometimes that's where the kind of the insights come from, second, third, fourth degree connections that it wasn't even on top of your mind that this is, that anything would even come from that, right? And I think that's how a lot of life is at times. It's a combination of like immersing yourself into an experience, right? An opportunity, and allowing for discovery to happen. And as you navigate along that path, that's where those serendipitous moments, those lucky moments where just things just kind of fall down into your lap like rain, open up, right? And one way to generate more of those serendipitous moments, more of that luck, is by tuning in more into that thing that you desire, right? Getting smarter on that thing, putting more reps towards that initiative, engaging with more people in that space, right? That way they can, rising tide lifts all boats, all ships, right? Like they can bring you up to speed, up to par with kind of what's necessary knowledge to have to be successful in that particular space that you have interest in. And so whenever you look at this idea of, man, I don't have, enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough resources, I don't know enough people in this industry or this space. Like, you have to start with what you have, right? I mean, first, it does take some initiative. Like, nothing is just gonna just happen automatically. Sometimes, in the rare case, something does happen out of the blue, right? Yeah, maybe you have a loved one who passes away, a rich uncle or grandparent or someone you didn't know about. They happen to write you in the will and they left you, from a monetary standpoint, a couple $1,000,000. Yeah, that's abundance in the form of some finances, which in turn can be utilized as a tool. It is a form of abundance, right? And so something like that is like trying to win the lottery, right? Like, it doesn't happen every day. It happens to some people, but not everybody, right? And the odds of it happening for you in that fashion are very rare, unless you're already part of a wealthy family, right? So for the majority of us, the way that we're going to stumble into abundance is by taking the first step of asking ourselves, like, what is it that we are trying to accomplish, right? Have a vision. What is the goal at the end of this thing? How long might it take based off of my desired outcome, right? Whether it's some type of physical, athletic feat you're trying to achieve, whether it's some monetary value you're trying to achieve, like, hey, you want to become a millionaire or a billionaire, whatever it may be. You just have to, depending on where you're at in terms of your capabilities, and that'll determine kind of how wide the time horizon needs to be, and or how shortened the time horizon has to be, if it's time dependent, right? Like, it just depends on what this thing is that you desire, what you're trying to go for in life. But you have to just be self-reflective. Start with the resources you have. Start to research a little bit. Leverage AI. You've got Gemini, you've got ChatGPT, you got Grok, you got all these chatbots that can help you get some quick information, right? Look who's into your network, talk to those people, see what they know, and just take the first step, right? Like the biggest issue that you tend to see most of the time is, people get paralyzed by this idea of paralysis of analysis, right? Like they overthink, and so it makes them more anxious, and then they just become paralyzed by those thoughts and never actually take action, right? Because they're overthinking. Sometimes you have to literally just throw yourself in the situation so that you can get quick learnings, right? And guess what? If you go 100 miles per hour in the wrong direction, at least you're able to quickly figure out that you're going in the wrong direction. You're allowed to course correct, make a U-turn, and turn around, right? So you don't ever have to feel like you can't make mistakes, right? The thing is, you want to be able to make mistakes quickly and early and cheaply, right? Iterate on those, learn from them, course correct, and try again, right? But taking those kinds of steps can at least help you start on a path towards gaining abundance in whatever you're trying to gain abundance in. So I think I'll leave it at that. Never limit yourself. Keep striving. Just know that we live in a world of abundance. At one point in time, it was just land, animals, and just nature and humans as we evolved. And somehow we figured out how to put these elements together to create the things that we've created, right? So the world is infinite, the universe is infinite, and our capabilities and what is possible. So just know that and be optimistic. Take care.